Kim, mute yourself.
All right. Excellent. We're going to get ready to start here in just a second. I'm going to allow everybody to log in. All right. All righty. Okay. Looks like we got quite a few people logging in, so we'll go ahead and get started. Well, welcome everyone. We're excited to have you joining us today, this Wednesday on Webinar Wednesday with Ed Hauck. Today, we're going to be talking about the 5 steps for performance engineering fundamentals for our plan review. This is a very important topic right now, especially as we're trying to make sure that we are building cost-effective homes to maintain and control our direct construction costs, as well as help with the issue of affordable housing. So before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping items that I'd like to go over with you. We are recording this webinar, so feel free to come back and revisit. We keep all of our webinars on our website at builderpartnerships.com. You just go to the events tab and then click on the webinar section. You can visit all of our webinars at any time. We will be taking your questions throughout the webinar. Ed will be doing about a 15-minute presentation, and then he will take your questions at the end. I will read them out loud, but in order to ask the questions, at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see 2 speech bubbles that have the letters Q and A underneath them. If you click on that, you're welcome to type in your question, and I will read the question out loud for Ed to answer at the conclusion of his short presentation. If we need follow-up on your question, I may go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself and help verify the question. And of course, we always welcome your comments and suggestions. Last week, we had some great suggestions on future webinars, so feel free to share those with us as well. I am going to pop up a poll here that we'd love for you to answer. I'm going to pop that up here right now. So go ahead and answer the following questions if you can. While you guys are answering that, I'm going to ask Ed a few questions. Ed is our speaker today, our presenter today, and he's been with us for quite a long time and has some very unique experience. Ed, can you share with us a little bit about your experience and where you come from as far as through the construction industry and into home building?
Yeah, it's kind of some people have similar paths into the industry. Mine started out literally as a framer. My football coach was a builder, and he had us carrying lumber on Saturdays. And Chuck always says this business is a disease, and I pretty much started carrying lumber and never left. After a couple of years, and by the time I turned the ripe old age of 20, I decided I didn't want to work for a builder. I wanted to go work for myself. So I started my own framing company when I was 20 years old. So my perspective on we call it performance engineering. Well, my perspective of performance engineering is a little bit different than a lot of people because of my experience in the framing world. Performance engineering means I'm not trying to get down and dirty, to the lowest common, denominator, get super cheap, and then cause quality problems later on. So I do tend to look at both. So my perspective when I'm starting, I do a lot in my old world. I ran the new product design. I'm still a custom builder. So my perspective on a new house is literally coming from the structure and taking that structure to blend in the most cost-effective structure as well as the best living space. When Emma Jane and I were talking before we got started, I said a lot of times when we look at it from living space, we don't really think about what it takes to design and build that house. I had a builder last year that to get 200 square feet over top of 600 square foot garage, they had 8 parallels. The cost value on the 8 parallels was crazy to get 200 square feet. We redesigned that space more cost effectively to hold up that 200 square feet. And lo and behold, we got 300 square feet and spent less money. So my perspective is a little bit different than a lot of people in the industry.
Well, and share a little bit too, because not only did you start off as a carpenter and move up through the ranks as a superintendent, production manager, and so on. You also grew quite a bit in the inside of the office where you helped run, you were partner of a organization. So share a little bit about how that perspective also helps create a unique environment for you to be able to look at this performance engineering topic.
It's a very good point. So, as I work with builders, and first of all, Chuck and Emma literally taught me all the metrics that you need to know about design, about building homes. So I used all those metrics, okay? And as you know, a carpenter, a framer, to purchasing, to production, to operations, to owner, everything I looked at was looking at the cost-effective side of building a home. A lot of it, as we're designing homes, we're literally throwing money away. And we'll go through the steps. We're throwing money away all over the place. Early on design, we're in a hurry. Does the rest of the team really know the cost of doing things? A lot of times they don't. I want the team to know when I'm adding something, what it's doing to our profitability and our price. Right now, we're under about 20 to 25% interest tax that's killing the affordability of our buyers. So I'm really want to pay attention to how I can watch those costs and make decisions based on cost. So my designer goes from framer to owner. So a very strange group of skills that how I put together the cost-effective house and the performance engineering.
Thanks, Ed. And that's why we love having part of this team, because you have such a great perspective on how to look at some of these problems that we're facing today. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll real quick, and let's take a peek at the results. All right, so it looks like, and I'm going to read these to you, Ed, because I don't know that you can see your screen.
I can see them.
Okay, so go ahead, and if you want to talk about the results real quick before we get started, and then let me know when you're ready to get going.
So I love in-house architecture. And by the way, I've used in-house and also outsource. In-house, my expectations are a whole lot higher in some cases than outsource. Outsource, you kind of, if you're not telling your architect and designers what you want, they have no clue. I do this conversation, and by the way, performance engineering comes by way of Steve Moore from VSB. Steve Moore and I do a lot of presentations. When it's outsourced, Steve has a line that says, the builders come to him and say, I'll know it when I see it. I have high expectations for the in-house because they should know the builder's perspective and also make sure that the structure and the engineering is in line with the company. Design team, I got a huge piece of owners. I'm glad to see a lot of purchasing. It's good to see sales. Sales are the front line. I've got to get their input because they're usually the first person to hear what buyers are looking for. Emma Jane, could you scroll up a little bit?
Yep.
So sales, I got at least 60% of sales involved. Where's do I have to do that? I don't see it. It's on my end. It's on my end. So sorry. I have a good piece of sales, and it's nice to see at least 50%, 46% of production is in there. The other we left as other because there's a whole lot of other parties that may have a say in it. I may not have my warranty team in the room doing the design, but I may have them take a look at it for tell me what's not working well. And when I say sales, that also may include sales, marketing, and my designers, by the way. Continuing down, more than one architect. Good, yes, I love to see that. No, by the way, if you're going to have more than one architect, the reason why I've always had more than one architect is I want to have different perspectives. I have a couple of architects in my market that I enjoy working with a lot. They all come to the table with different skill sets, different ideas. I may use some of their ideas, elevations, living space, whatever, and I may share that with others. And by the way, when I'm working with an architect and I'm the one running this, it's my house, not theirs. I don't lose control of my own home. See, the next one is, oh, good. Do you have a company standard for design and architectural? That's very good to see. You'll see later on, I'll talk about what these are. I don't want to ever design to minimum. Minimum is one step above garbage, okay? I'm cleaning that up for the audience. So have a design load, know what they are, and we'll talk about that later on. So only about 23% of you do not. So when we're done this, I want you all to go back and look at this and think about what you're going to do differently going forward. Oh, I'm very happy to see you have a relationship with design engineers. Design engineers, when I'm working, and we'll talk about that later on, I'm going to go back and forth, making sure I'm getting the highest performance I possibly can for the lowest cost. So the 30-some% of you who don't, figure out who's doing your design. And we'll talk about whether it's an outsourced design. I used to employ a lot of times my own designer and work with them and pay them because they're working for me. If I'm using lumber yards, by the way, I got one lumber company. I have an excellent designer. He's awesome. I would pick him all the time. A lot of times, however, and there may be some lumber folks on here, don't take it the wrong way. A lot of times the lumber company hires a rookie right out of college and throws him into it. And rookies tend to cover their you know what, and they can tend to round up. So that's why I want to know them, question them. When I start seeing oversized headers, I have a 5.5 by 20-inch header, and I go look at the design criteria to put in 3.5 by 18. You just oversized by about a third. Do you sole source lumber? Yes. Okay. You all who answered yes, go make some friends, find another lumber company. I have in my market about 5 lumber companies that I can use. If you went into this lumber crisis 2 years ago with one lumber company, you had to ride the storm out with whatever they told you. So you kind of had no choices. Right now, I don't care how many homes a year you do. It's nice to have other opinions, talk to other people. And the first thing you're going to say, well, if I go back to my lumber company, yeah, they're going to cry, they're going to kick, they're going to roll on the floor like a 2-year-old baby. Tell them to get over it. In my old world, I was bound by company policy that I wrote, by the way, that I had to bid all things out to at least 3 people. If that was monthly, quarterly, whatever. And by the way, if you're not doing that, see what I'm holding up here? You have no idea how much money you're leaving on the table. It's insane. So go find another lumber company. One of our other consultants, Kim, is just getting involved with her HBA. She just moved to Nashville. I can guarantee you when I see her next week, she's going to go find 3 new lumber companies to go talk to. So any other questions, Emma Jane?
That was it so far. So I'm going to download the results so we can keep that. All right. Well, let's get started here. There you go. Slide 1.
So keep it simple, silly. It is crazy how we complicate things. We run out. We don't have any idea what we want. We can't make up our mind. We don't have a plan. The team doesn't even have a plan. As Steve Moore says, the lawyers tell them all the time, I don't know what it is, but I'll know it when I see it. You got to have a plan. I am a bit of a PIA. PIA stands for a pain in the ass, by the way. I'm a bit of a pain in the ass. When I go work with my architects or designers, I already know exactly how many square feet I want. I already know what kind of elevation, what kind of style. I want to have a lot of information going to them. We tend to get into this and really complicate things. And then in the design phase, because we don't know what's going on, we just keep adding. And every time we add things, again, you're just throwing money at the problem. So step 1, again, know your design loads. Know what code is. Where is our target? What won't we go below? So you've got to have a good company standard. That goes for joists, headers, beams, rafters, trusses, everything on the structural side. Have a company code and policy. Also, if you're doing that, tell the architect what joists are most cost effective. How do I want the frame? So if you don't have a standard, and there was a number of you who did not have a standard, figure out what that standard is and share that standard with whoever your architects or designers are. Once I know what that standard is, once I start seeing things and questioning them, I'm going to ask them, where am I to my standard? Am I above or below? By the way, excessive has no value. We had a large portion of the sales and marketing team on a part of this process. If there's a salesperson on this call, I'd like to hear a salesperson who ever says, my power lamps are bigger than your power lamps. My headers are bigger than your headers. Nobody ever talks about that. Excess has no value whatsoever to the buyer, okay? The next slide is if you have not seen this, you are leaving money on the table. See, the far right is below code. If you're, it's at minimum standard. One more back, Jane. Sorry, one more forward. Let's see. There we are. This table right here. Sorry, Jane. That was me. It was a little slow. This table right here is important. Understand these tables. By the way, you can get this. You can load it up on your iPad, your tablet. Everything you need to know about designing is in that fine print right there. And if you're working with a company, I don't care which one is, any of the lumber companies, I love them all and I hate them all. Okay, one of the other people we're working with yesterday said they were lumber agnostic, which is the same thing. Understand where you need to be. Understand what these costs are. On that left-hand side is your size, and you see the different series. The last couple of years, you can get some series, you couldn't get the other. So get to know what these things mean and use them. Have them available. When you're talking with a designer, look up what they're telling you. Next slide, please, Emma Jane. So step 2, you have to have an efficient building, okay? When I want to think about this, how am I designing? Am I exceeding loads? Am I really making the space harder than need be, okay? As we start doing this, we're not paying attention to the costs. We're adding extra expenses without even knowing what we're doing. One of the things as I'm doing this, I'm looking at the design space, what we need to sell the homes, what the buyers are looking for, and what does it cost to do that? So step back and look at it. Usually speed is our enemy. Oh, I got to have this done. Usually speed's the enemy because we waited too long to make decisions. You know, we carry too many houses. I can't get into that much detail. If you can't get into detail, you definitely have too many houses. Emma Jane were talking with a builder just recently. I don't know, he had 20 different houses and to build 30 homes a year. So, you know, that's just a really bad problem. So make sure speed is not killing me. Next slide. Have an efficient building practice. How do I assemble homes? What kind of materials am I using? I mean, talk with the framer, talk about lumber company. Can I actually design and build these cost effectively? And can I also build these easily? Again, a lot of my background is I think like a framer. Well, that's not going to be very easy. It's going to cost me time. Can I do it faster, easier? Okay. So think about your building practice. What is yours? And every market's different all over the country. And last year, I finally worked in Oregon. I think I've worked in every one of the lower continental United States. Everywhere I go, something's a little different. But in your market, be consistent, okay? Build your homes in product line, one product line consistently. Don't make them harder and change. Makes it harder on everybody. Make it harder on framers, material companies, the mechanical companies trying to install things. Know what the costs are for all these materials. That's why I want you to know your designers. You should have your designers on speed dial, texting them, hey, I got a question. You did this, can I find another way? The more and more I talk to these designers and get them to understand what I'm trying to accomplish, the better off you are. The last piece on this one is introduce some competition. We had a large portion of you that are sole sourced. Now, I understand, and I've seen some of you, and I know some markets don't have a lot of choice. If you have choice, get out and know them, okay? Get to know the other designers. In some cases, like I said, I've got one lumber company. His name's Troy. He's an awesome designer. He and I, as I'm working on houses, I'll be talking to him all the time. By the way, when I talk to him, it's early in the morning. He's in early. Nobody's bugging him. So introduce some competition. The other thing I like to do is potentially go to the manufacturer, let them work with you. Sometimes they have better resources. Step 4, okay, start thinking about some high efficiency building techniques. This was a builder we were walking with, and this ended up being a 46 foot deep wall. Had no reason to be 16 inches on center. It could easily have been 2 foot on center. It doesn't sound like a lot. Now the 2x4s are a little less. It doesn't sound like a whole lot of money, but use times $157 times 400 homes a year, it starts to add up. The other thing, same builder was using 2 stud corners versus, at more high efficiency wall intersections. We counted 60 corners in this house. So this particular house doing nothing special was $500 a house. And that's with cost-effective lumber. Right now, that number's up a little bit since when I did this slide. Next one, step 4, and I'll call on one of my other consultants, Kim, in a second. Unit pricing versus lump sum. when you're going unit pricing, and I was working with a builder in Texas, I believe he's on the call. He was telling me how much he saved. There is a super premium when you go to a large company and have them manage your frame process for you. You're paying an insane premium. Me being coming from that side, I manage every step. And I was just reviewing an estimate that Kim and Ron produced today, all the way down to use. So Kim, you want to talk about some of your experiences on this unitized pricing process?
Yeah, so we were working with a builder out in Arizona that did everything turnkey. And when it come time to do performance engineering on all their plans, it was really difficult to figure out what was going to cost more money and what might actually save some money, because they didn't know what anything cost. They didn't know what a 8.0 door cost versus a 6.8 door. They didn't know what a can light cost versus a disc light. They did all their lumber turnkey. So the lumber company had the framers, they did the takeoff, they provided the lumber, they provided the guy. And it's costing them a ton more money to do it that way. I mean, we like to tell people, if you're doing everything turnkey, I mean, some of the simplest things you can break out are roofing. You can save $3,000 to $4,000 a house right there with just unitized pricing, you supplying the material and you getting a labor only guy. So you have to know what your costs are. And the only way you do that is with unitized pricing.
100% agree. I kind of grew up with the unitized pricing, and Kim and I have known each other in her past life, and we've been working on some of these projects. So I got to have a good, tight estimate. I have to know, I was working with our guy, Ron, and we were talking about a good estimate. Where's the material going? Does the framer know how to use it? By the way, what happens a lot of times is our framer is telling our superintendents where material is going, how they're using it. You have to be the expert. So the next one is really about good estimates versus poor estimates. Usually the value of unitized pricing falls apart is when I don't have good estimates, and you lose everybody's buy-in. So you have to have the best estimates. Step 5, job site material management. Okay, you have to understand, if I'm buying material, I now have to control it. And the reason why a lot of builders went to turnkey a long time ago is they weren't managing it. It takes a little bit of effort. What Kim's talking about is potentially, in some cases, depending on which cost code, for lumber, by the way, it could be anywhere from 5 to 15 to 20%. It's insane. So I have to understand and be good at managing the job site material. To do this, I have to have a team. The team has to talk. Purchasing, my superintendent, my framer, all have to talk about what this material looks like, where it's coming from, how it's being delivered. Do I have a scope of work for delivery? And the last line here is, it can't be any blame. By the way, it can't always be an estimate. And you'll see some pictures later on. That's not always an estimate. A lot of times it's use, okay? So you have to have that no blame culture. So for myself, coming from the field way back when into purchasing and operations, I create the no blame culture. We ask the question why 5 times to figure it out. So the next is, and I do this all the time, kind of as a joke, is certificate of achievement, count estimating group. The worst estimate for a single family home under 3,000 square feet. This sounds like a Home Builders Association, awards function, but it's not. I've got to have the best estimates, not the worst estimates. And by the way, that means sometimes my estimator has to go in the field. I ask the estimators all the time, you get out in the field. More often than not, they say no. Some of the larger builders, regional builders, and especially publics, they have what they call an auditor. The auditor is not an estimator. The auditor kind of is independent, may report to the director of purchasing, but I want to go out and make sure what we're estimating and the usage is the exact same as the intent. So the next slide that you start looking at it, these are just things we see on job sites all the time. Top left was engineering done in the field where we didn't know what to do. We didn't have any design. They were told there's a large granite, so let's just throw some extra under joist on it. As I was walking going across the top, there was 35 sheets. Every house had at least 35 sheets of OSB 7/16 and 3/4. And then you start seeing just waste all over the place. Every you see there on the ground, that's nothing but money laying everywhere. Okay, the top right is really just bad engineering. Okay, the bad engineering is nobody ever really calculated that point load, never found out where it was. So that's the other side of it. I have to understand exactly from design to estimating to field, how much money I'm leaving on the table. And by the way, every one of these jobs that we were on, we found at least 5% in wasted and lost profit. Okay, 5% of your directs. That's a lot of money. Okay. The next slide is, and if anybody's ever been to seminars, any of the production seminars, you've always seen, you never want to win the shin walk of shame. So my joke builder here is waste most builders. You don't ever want to win that award. When I start seeing more lumber on the ground than a builder has profit, that's usually a problem. So Emma Jane told us this was a fairly short presentation. What I'm hoping for is start asking us some questions, okay? What are you guys doing? What are you doing well? And what should you change in your own operation? Emma Jane, any questions?
Not yet. We don't have any questions yet, but I do want to ask you some questions while people are trying to think of their questions. When you are, because one of the things you do is you can a lot of times find some of these things before the homes are built by looking at the plans, correct? So
yes,
when somebody sends you their plans, and what are some of the things that you're looking for when you're doing performance engineering?
So I'm actually working on a couple right now, and I think one of the builders is actually on. I was on their site about a little over a month ago, and I just, from walking and looking, start looking at some oversized joists, oversized headers, pulled out, and I didn't have the right tables with me. I had a leather lumber company, and I start measuring some of the size of the joist, top and bottom cord, and looked at it. They were definitely not the most cost-effective solution. They were way above, and I don't mind. Again, I want to make sure what is code minimum and what's my standard. They were well above the standard. Also, at that same time, a lot of times what happens is we design it and we don't actually think how I'm going to build that structure. So in this case, we're actually looking at, there's two things, and I have a lot of builders, especially some of our builder groups, and any of the owners here, you'll laugh when I say this. There's a part that it's my house. I want to build my house my way, and I have a certain level that is I want to build to, and I 100% agree with that. My elevations, I want a certain way. So round one is really being cost effective in my current building envelope and not affecting the product whatsoever. Where we are now, a year into this, is it's getting painful, and I got to start making decisions. Can I simplify the building envelope and keep the curb appeal the same, keep the aesthetics of the house the same, but can I find some stuff on the side and rear that don't have any value? I was working with a builder on the left coast, and they had little pop outs here and there, and that was being affected in the hip roof that cost thousands of dollars. And by the way, on tight lot scenarios, nobody could see it. I've never seen at a marketing event, somebody in the backyard saying, wow, look at the elevation, rear elevation of that house. That's got a lot going on. Nobody cares. So there's a couple of things. Is one, what doesn't change the look of my home, and then the second step is, when do I start making some tough decisions to get my price down and start moving the meat again?
Excellent. Thank you, Ed. We had some questions that were submitted prior to, and one of them was, what is the most economical design and materials for long spans in large homes? Ceilings, floors, openings, decks, roof, etc.
So I-joists are a phenomenal product, and that span table, that span chart I showed you, will tell you, go look at it, go figure out what your design loads are, should be. Go look at that. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to go back to multiple lumber companies, and I can, by the way, those things are all free downloads. I have like 3 different manufacturers on my iPad. I'll go find some of those. Yes.
Can I use the TJIs for roof rafters?
Absolutely.
In Texas, I mean, I see guys that are using 22, 24, 26 foot long premium grade lumber. Can I frame that roof and make it easier for the framer by using TJIs?
So any of the I-joist companies, if you get another thing, go download that information. That stuff is very, and to Chuck's point, I can use 9.5 I-joist and start spanning some phenomenal spans and still do 2 foot on center. What kills me, Chuck, is Not only are they using these premium lengths, they're on 16-inch on centers. They don't need to be. So absolutely they can frame with that. It's by the way, it's all in the book how to do it. It takes a little bit of extra care to understand how to make cuts and how to assemble. But it's so much easier. It's lighter, more cost effective. I'm getting very long runs out of it. So Chuck, to answer your question, all day long.
And now I don't have to have interim bearing points. And my framers can basically handle that material very easily because it's a hell of a lot lighter than a 2x12.
It's a lot lighter. The other thing that Chuck was just talking about is what I see all the time, and I'm working with a builder right now that's trying to go true stick frame. And can I redesign that product, keeping it from the curb looking the same? Kim and I had this conversation about the cost-effective side of a truss. The problem with the truss is you don't think like a truss builder, you'll never get it to work, okay? Hip roof trusses sometimes will cost you more money, but can I start looking at these things and find more cost-effective ways to do it? And the answer is yes. That's that phase 2 where I got to start getting a little painful in how I do things. The other one that's becoming more and more popular lately with the open floor plans, and to answer the question on the long spans, I worked with a builder last year, had 32-foot open floor, 32-foot open plans, and trying to figure out how to do them in open web trusses. And we made it work. We had a couple point loads here and there, which really, once we eradicated them working with designer, we got that out. And what Chuck mentioned before is some of these point loads, you start looking at the point loads and following them down. As you're doing this, don't forget, go back to your engineer and what concrete can I eliminate? I see these in-slab footings for point loads that are all over the place. Don't forget, that's part of redesigning that. Don't forget to get that credit out.
Yeah, and one of the things, a follow-up point that I had is, should I get the truss engineering book? And should I bring the truss engineer and my structural engineer into the office to review the plans and to ask questions? They built a lot of cost into my house.
Absolutely. So, by the way, I was on the left coast with a builder, and I said to the builder, every time you look up and you see one of the little silver plates, that's what you see, $100. Start working with your engineers. First of all, if you're a truss builder, all those little pieces, more than likely, your truss salesman is doing this, telling you it's easy. If there's any lumber truss salesman on here, sorry if I offend you, but oh well, I'll get over it. So will you. But anyway, all those little tiny pieces, those little tiny pent roofs. In some cases, I'll use them when I have a very tight building. Other cases, I had a good sales rep said that's easier stick frame than me building it. Okay, so watch your overbuilds. Okay, to Chuck's point is, if they're not thinking about it, they're costing you money. Lately, people have been so busy. I don't think they're doing it intentionally, racking up the tab, but I want them to start thinking about every little piece they're sending me, and can I actually save money doing it that way?
Ed, you're an old framer. And
I'm old, I know that.
I used to have my framers tell me that those little half trusses for the porches and so forth, they would much rather build them themselves as opposed to get those trusses, because it creates more of a problem for them with the as a pre-built unit as opposed to just field build.
So pent roofs, porches, single pent roof porches, all those little tiny pent roofs around, a lot of times all those little pieces, if you think about it, you're getting charged by the plate for all the jig time to set that stuff up. The only time I'll use a mono truss for a roof and a pent roof is when I have very tight spaces and I want to control that. Another thing is, if I'm doing that, sometimes my loads are a little bit less, but more often than not, to Chuck's point, I want to look. So a lot of times what I ask for from a builder is, give me your truss drawings and all your cross sections. Sometimes girder trusses. I was working with a builder recently. He had a 4-piece girder truss. We went and cost effectively back to a 3.5 by 18 parallam type of a girder. By the way, it was much cheaper to use that girder. Plus, the framer said it's easier for me to do it as I'm building, and when the trusses come, it's all done. I built it on the ground without the crane sitting around. I put all the joist hangers on it, and it was faster. And by the way, faster was also cheaper. So
Mhm.
100% agree, Chuck.
Yeah, and one of the other things, and it's something that nobody ever thinks about. But I used to have the Portland Cement Association come in, a representative, and talk to us about Portland cement. The only reason we have a 4-inch slab is because we don't do good prep. We really only need a 3-inch slab on a driveway and all on a basement. But it's the fact that we're not holding our installers accountable for prep work that we go to 4.
Chuck, that's true with all engineers. They're assuming that we're going to not pay attention to the quality of the workmanship, so therefore they're over engineering. That includes portal details, joist, trusses, concrete, foundations. Pretty much anywhere you look, they're over designing because of their fear of bad workmanship.
Right.
By the way, that's why we call this performance engineering, because workmanship has a big part in performance engineering. If I'm following it properly, if you go back that book on the span tables, and you look at what happens when you're gluing and screwing the field, it adds 7%. There's little things like that is huge on saving money. By the way, again, every manufacturer, free download, and I update mine to multiple companies all the time because they change. And I have the same exact piece right now on dimensional lumber. And dimensional lumber, different species are different. And dimensional lumber span tables have been shrinking because of the quality, and probably, and it's, I want to know what those things are. What can I span? What is a true span, by the way? Span isn't out to out. Span is end to end. And if I'm doing a span that's going from the front wall to back wall over a beam in the middle, that's a compound. That adds and saves money. Just by going compound, I just got better performance and save my framer some time. You have to know all these things to put a house together cost effectively. When I first met Chuck, and Chuck and Anna educated me on all the numbers they preach. So a lot of builders right now are 50, 55, 60% direct construction costs. When I first met Chuck and started working on mine, my numbers were about 35% on direct construction costs. To get those numbers down, you really have to understand everything we're showing you here. By the way, when you download this, there's a way that shows you how to assemble joist, how to assemble if you're using those rafters, how to size beams. In most cases, and by the way, I'm not an engineer. I'll go back and challenge them. More often than not, my local engineer, when I challenge him, we have a bet. If I'm right, he buys lunch. If he's right, he buys lunch. So I get free lunches all the time.
And truly, Ed, this is giving you the power to understand what kind of questions to ask. Because it's not necessarily knowing the information, it's knowing enough to ask the right questions.
Yeah, I guess I need a hobby because I read these things on the plane sometimes. I'm working on plans.
But this gives them the power to understand what kind of questions to ask, because not having this information, you don't even know to ask the question or to challenge the engineer and say, hey, can we do this or can we do that? But having this information gives you the power to be able to ask those questions that you wouldn't know to ask otherwise.
And
so by the way,
just a comment. My floor joists. If I change my rim, my plate from a 2x4 to a 2x8 because it's on an 8-inch foundation, how much can I save on my span? How much can I reduce my species, or can I reduce the size of my floor joist because I reduced the span?
So this is why it's important. So on the top right where I have circled in blue, that's the do not use. Obviously, that's the minimum. And this company actually recommends not. Everything to the left is what you want to use. And to Chuck's point, on that left side, that second column from the left, I want to go down and get that lineal foot cost from those pieces. And to Chuck's point, I've got one of my own houses is a 20-foot rear section of the house, out to out. And I have 10-inch foundation walls because I use 2x8 instead of we usually use 2x6. That extra 4 inches in the span saved me $500 in that section. That's $500 for just using a different sill plate, because it's the end-to-end side is what matters. I want to take a look at these And when I'm doing this, I want to make sure I do have some wiggle room. Everything on the right, I'm not going to use. Same thing happens when I'm sizing beams, headers, designing, how can I be on, am I on 12 inch on center, 16s, 19 twos, 2 foot on center? I want to look at all these things. And by the way, this is very easily plugged into Excel and figure out what that cost is. And by the way, a lot of times the one designer I told you about, Troy, he and I will sit there and debate this or run it 3 different ways and give me cost literally in about 45 minutes. But I know him well. Chuck just talked about get him in the same room. I'll actually spend the time to drive to his office and sit down at the computer and work with him and bring him coffee, bring him donuts, bring him lunch. Guess what? He'll spend 45 minutes with me and save me a couple $1,000s, to Chuck's point, getting this and optimizing. Again, the word is performance engineering. I want to get the best performance for the best price.
We actually went to the lumberyard and asked for the truss tables for our roof trusses. And we could sit there and design the roof trusses to make sure that they were cost effective before we ever went to the truss designer. I mean, it's a book, and it's got the pictures, and it's got all the parts and pieces and the pricing. It's so simple to do this stuff.
Very much so. I know this is a lot. It's not just about designing a pretty house. It's designing a cost-effective house using performance engineering. How am I assembling that house? Knowing the players that can help me cost-effectively, do this. In my old world, we talk about trade councils all the time. In my old world, my core group of trade council, my trade advisory group, would get a plan in advance, okay, as my first draft. I would go not out for bid, out for comment. Come back from the foundation guy. Well, this is going to be a problem. It's going to cost this, or I got to do this. Or maybe it's my kitchen guy coming back, like, you have an excessive run here. I think we can cut that down and have enough cabinets, more than enough net cabinets in this price point. Or possibly it's my MEPs coming back and saying, your design is making it hard for us. How are you going to make this? How are you going to make this work? I worked with the builder last year, and by switching because of spans to open web, we went from 2 systems to 1 system and a split zone. That, by the way, was a $9,000 savings. That was on top of the extra cost for the open web. So the open web didn't cost money, and we also backed all the concrete out from all the point loads. So to me, it's pretty easy. Again, keep it simple, stupid, and time can be on your side, or time can be against you.
We did have one comment that I'd like to share from John. He says that they've been reluctant to use a turnkey framer due to our concern for the quality of the lumber he may use to save dollars.
Can't agree with you more. I have no idea what Captain Walmart's going to supply me with. You have no control. Ron and I talk a lot about what species are we specifying all over the place, different parts of the country, different species. Are they using number 3? Are they using utility grade? Are they buying the absolute, worst eye joist? I have no control, and I'm very particular about that. In the winter months, I might change my OSB decking to be a higher performance because it's taking me longer. It's getting wetter. I might spend $8 a sheet in bad months. I might save that. And to John's point, I have no idea what a framer will send. He is tasked with getting that house done up quickly, and has got probably no responsibility going down the road. So, John, very good point. Thank you.
We had one more question. It was from the same person about the long spans. He asks about engineering to reduce concrete, steel, and engineering costs of 12-foot basement walls. And in parentheses, he writes 10 feet plus 2-foot framed wall ?
So there's a lot of different scenarios comes to mind. I was working with the builder who was doing some pony walls, and the framer was charging excessive for the pony walls. I'd have to see the plan, but a lot of times, to Chuck's point, is I want to go back and so depending on where you are and what code you're on, in my state, I can go to, instead of the prescriptive, which is just pour concrete by the numbers, I can go to the performance and sit there and work with an engineer and find out what's the best performance. changing the steel. If I go just by what's in the code book, I might be spending more money. So to your point, as I look at it multiple different ways, get to know the players and work with them to find the best cost-effective solution. We just did this with a townhouse builder and start playing with some of the walls that were way over designed for no reason whatsoever, and figured out how much more cost effectively we do that. In that case, by the way, instead of doing the jumps in concrete, we did the jumps in frame. The framer said it was actually easier because if concrete was always wrong, concrete guy was more than willing to give us credit for not having to go through all those jumps and hoops in the concrete. So good question. So.
Well, excellent. Thank you, Ed. That's all I have for questions today. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your perspective, and Chuck for coming in and asking some good clarifying questions as well. And I want to thank Kim for joining us today as well to offer her perspective. It's a big topic. It's something that we're discussing a lot of times with our clients within our builder groups, one-on-one consulting. So thank you so much for sharing that with our Webinar Wednesday group.
Just a comment that
Yep.
the importance of this is Emma and I have been working with builders for 55 years. And we've done our financial studies for 30 years. The problem that every builder has is direct construction costs is too high. Everybody complains about land, but land has always stayed about 20% of the sales price of the house. Our sales price of the house, the cost of the land and the sales price of the house seem to move in tandem. But we're always sitting there with 55 to 60% of our sales price in hard cost. And we want it to be at about 50. So you've got 70% for your land and your hard cost, and that leaves you the remainder for operating expenses, which is typically somewhere around 16 to 20%, and it gives you about a 10% to 12% profit. What we're talking about here is key. We get so concerned about what all the waste and the inefficiencies in the construction process. These are all your dollars. If you saw all that lumber just laying around on the job sites and what Ed was showing you, that's my profit. Every one of those dollars, the 10 sheets of drywall that are sitting in every one of your garages, that's probably about a $50 per sheet because I bought it turnkey to be hung and taped and textured. That's my money. That's my profits. My bag of mortar mix that is getting rained on this weekend. That's my profit. And we get so concerned about that because we deserve better than what we typically get in the way of profitability going through the operation that we do.
Mm-hmm.
This is 100% agree, Chuck.
This is a critical piece. And if you need help, you got Kim and you got Ed and you got me and Ron all here to help you.
So by the way, there's any owners here in the last 5 years with out of control prices just skyrocketing, we added stuff in, to Chuck's point. When the houses were jumping a couple $1,000s a month, it was easy to add it in. Now it's got to get it out. And again, I call it build by the numbers. Chuck and Emma laid out the numbers. What you got to do is follow that guideline, and know the cost of what you're putting in the house. It's not that hard. Again, like Chuck said, it's the biggest category in the operation, and you got to get a little tough on yourself to pull the cost out, or spend the time and do the performance engineering, which to me is not hard. It's easy.
And I cannot raise my sales price because interest rates are going to continually go up. They're moving up right now. And my consumer, for the affordability of the product for the consumer is killing us. So to make a profit, I've got to be efficient at what I do.
Chuck, I was talking to the builder yesterday. The buy down was costing him $30,000 for the buy down, which is driving the traffic. But where did that 30 grand come from?
100% profit.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that do? I mean, right now it feels good. It's 30,000. Yeah, let's give that away. but you might as well just write a check out of your back pocket when you give that 30,000 away, because it came right out of your hide.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Jane, any last questions from anybody?
No, I don't have any other questions. But I want to thank you guys for coming, and a reminder of the different services that we have here to provide to help you accomplish your goals for profitability, efficiency, performance engineering, reducing costs, any of those kinds of things. Of course, we have our rebate program through builder partnerships. And if you have not explored our rebate program, I encourage you to do so. Make sure you connect with our group here at Builder Partnerships. You can get to us through the website, or you can call us directly, and we'll be happy to see what kind of a match we have for you with the many different programs we have here at Builder Partnerships. We obviously have our continuing training through our webinars. We have on-demand classes. We're getting ready to roll out our technical training classes that should be coming out soon. So keep your eyes open for more information on that. We partnered with Ibicus on that program. And so that's going to be the how-to build, helping people in your organization. They have a home building 101 class that we're offering that helps your inside staff really understand the process of building a home. And that is all online, self-directed, and you get a little certificate for attendance. We also have our live courses and training as well. Our consulting services with all of our consultants that we have here on staff, they're all professionals. They've been there, done that. They understand the ins and outs of the home building industry. They've been trained by Chuck and Emma and understand the management concepts that we have been preaching for the last 50 years. And really, we have that unique ability with Chuck and Emma having been professors for the University of Denver and using their home building business as an opportunity to test all of the things that they've been teaching to make sure that they work. So make sure you connect with one of our consultants if you're needing some one-on-one help. And then we also have our surveys. So if you're looking to see how you're doing in the eyes of your vendors and your trades, we can do a builder of choice survey. We have an employer of choice survey, and we also have a customer service survey that we can help you with on that. And of course, this is my favorite thing that we offer. It's our builder groups. It's basically a builder support group. So this gives an opportunity for non-competing builders across the country to get together and really talk about some of the most important topics. Performance engineering is something we've talked about in our builder groups regularly. We do have a new builder group that we're getting ready to get started, and we have a few spots left open in that group. So if you're interested, this is the time to check it out. We have spots available. We don't have spots available all the time, so make sure you contact me directly and I'll see if we have a spot for you. I mentioned our builder partnerships rebate program. These are the different manufacturers and service providers that we work with. So if you recognize any of the names on this list, please feel free to give us a call and we'll see how we can help you. Our in-person seminars are coming up in the fall. They do fill up quickly. We'll only be offering one superintendent class, one managing for profit class, and one production management class this fall. New Orleans is guaranteed to sell out. It has every year that we've gone to New Orleans. So please be sure to register early for that. If you have questions, you can reach out to us directly and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Production management is going to be here early November in Denver, Colorado. It's still not cold. So if you like cooler weather, but not cold weather, it's a great time to visit Denver. So we'd love to have you for that. And again, thank you so much for joining us today on Webinar Wednesday. We'll be back shortly in the next couple of weeks with another program. So keep your eyes open for the next Webinar Wednesday. And with that, have a great afternoon and we will see you all soon. Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you, Ed and team for helping us out today.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you,
See you guys.
everybody.